treatment money could buy. For a mad pauper, things were different.
A poor person from the parish would have been a considerable burden to that community in terms of care. They may have sought some sort of help from a local physician or local clergyman, taking them into their house. If desperate, they may have found some kind of private madhouse to put them into, very costly. The chances were, though, that, shall we say, a poor farmer's wife would simply have been restrained in some way in the attic or the basement and occasionally visited by the clergyman's wife.
With the coming of an industrialized society, this primitive version of care in the community gave way to a more organized approach.
The late 18th century is notable for a general movement in the handling of the poor towards a greater reliance on institutions. We have workhouses and almshouses becoming an important part of handling the pauper insane. But you also have prisons becoming much more central part of the criminal justice system. And in the case of the mad, an increasing reliance on more specialized institutions, be they private profit-making madhouses or charity asylums devoted to handling the mentally ill.
The York Asylum was one of the first of these charitable institutions set up by public subscription in 1774. Many so-called pauper patients were sent to asylums like York by magistrates' courts. In the summer of 1813 at Doncaster, Godfrey Higgings sentenced a labourer who had attacked an elderly neighbour.
William Vickers, you have been found guilty of common assault, in that you did senselessly and wantonly strike an elderly woman, causing her extensive and permanent injury. You have been examined by the attending physician and have been declared insane. I hereby order that you be handed over to the overseer of the poor, who will escort you to the asylum at York, where you will remain for a minimum of 6 months.
The York Asylum took both affluent and pauper patients. The fees of wealthier patients were supposed to subsidize treatment for the poor, but in practice, they were at the bottom of the pile.
Poor lunatics got a bad deal in the early asylums, and they, in general, were neglected. They didn't have the power of the pocket. And so what happened to them was that, on the whole, they got very little treatment. In the spring, when it was thought the sap was rising, and so mad people would become unruly, they would have their blood let, and they would be purged, and that would sort of deplete them and cool them down. But beyond that, there was very little in the form of creative and salutary treatment going on. By and large, the docile were left to their own devices, and the furious and the dangerous were manacled and chained or straitjacketed.
6 months after sentencing Vickers, Higgins was to see for himself the results of confinement in the York Asylum.
Perhaps you remember my husband, William Vickers.
I really must protest. Who are you?
My husband, Mr. Higgins. You sent him to the asylum 6 months ago.
This is no time, no place.
Please, sir. Papers from the surgeon, Mr. Charles Maples, sir, him that saw my husband both in that terrible place and out. Please, sir. Filthy and lousy he was when he came out. Had the itch so bad it kept him awake nights, and his legs were very much swelled. And Mr. Maples, he said one of his legs were mortified. And here, sir, is an account of the clothing he had when he went in. One good and nearly new blue coat, a new scarlet silk shirt, 2 cotton shirts.
Yes, it's all here, Mrs. Vickers.
But he brought back not one article he took with him, sir. Not one. They said he tore his clothes with his teeth when his hands were confined, but I don't believe it, sir. Not both sets. Turn round, William. Take your shirt off. No, sir. Keepers stole the clothes. Kept the money for themselves, I'm certain of it. Look, sir. They beat him, sir. Whipped him like an animal, he told me. Irons, Mr. Higgins. They bound him to the wall.
But, Mrs. Vickers, if a man is violent, and uncontrollable. What's to be done with him?
But he's not violent. I know he shouldn't have done what he did to that old woman, but he's not a violent man.
He was declared insane, Mrs. Vickers. There's no saying what he may do.
Look at him, sir. Just look at him. 6 months ago he was a strong, healthy man. What am I to do?
When a somewhat battered Vickers was brought before Godfrey Higgins, the magistrate was quite naturally appalled by what he saw. And just about his only recourse at the time to try to get some resolution of this issue was to expose what had happened in the pages of the local newspaper.
Letter to the York Courant. I think it my duty to lay before you certain facts which came publicly before me as a magistrate respecting a lunatic of the name of William Vickers. He was sent to the asylum by my orders, against his friend's consent. I am bound, in fairness to this poor but respectable and unfortunate man, to show that I will not connive at the injustice with which he appears to have been treated there.
But the letter was not to reach the pages of the York papers. The following day, Higgins received an unexpected visitor, Dr. Charles Best, physician of the York Asylum.
I won't take up much of your time, sir, since I'm certain that you, like myself, are greatly occupied with other matters. Mr. Peacock, editor of the York Courant, has passed on to me a letter about a former patient of mine, William Vickers.
I beg your pardon, sir. That letter was intended for publication.
I've no wish to suppress publication, sir, merely to correct certain misapprehensions.
Is that my letter, sir?
Mr. Higgins, if you will allow me to clarify any misunderstanding.
I did not misunderstand the bruises on William Vickers, Dr. Best, nor the lice.
Of course not, sir, but perhaps you don't entirely comprehend their origin. Now, William Vickers was seized with an apoplectic fit. He'd been ill for weeks. His bodily discharges had become involuntary. And although he was supplied with every extra comfort and had a special attendant constantly by him, well, it was quite impossible to keep him in a state of complete cleanliness. Lice naturally are attracted to such conditions.
And the bruises?
Brought on by himself whilst being restrained. For his own good, sir, the man was in the grip of a violent and uncontrollable seizure.
What of the medical treatments for such a condition?
Purges, bleedings, blisterings. The best practice of the day, sir, the very same as those employed by the King's own physician. Believe me, the mad can be shocking, sir, unpredictable and violent. I have been faced with men whose sole intent has been to throttle me, who've used all their strength, and what strength they have, sir. And with women who've made lewd suggestions. They have no inhibitions, no sense of right and wrong, no shame. Oh, God's creatures, certainly, sir, but they are less than human.
These were gentlemen physicians. They saw themselves as being members of the gentlemanly upper class. They saw their work, their trade, as trying to develop good contacts with those who could pay them. When they were asked to look after people in a subscription asylum, for example, as at York, one can imagine that they would have seen their duties as very limited. They would have visited perhaps once or twice a week. I mean, they were distant people. They would see their role as something they did just to help out the poor fools who came there, and if those people chose to behave badly or to shout or to scream, again, they saw that not so much as a medical problem, but as a problem to be dealt with by the families, by the keepers.